This story is titled, Parents Made Me Drop Out of College to Help Run Their Failing Restaurant. When it finally succeeded, they sold it and gave all the money to my younger sister's band. Have you ever sacrificed everything for your family, only to watch them hand your dreams to someone else on a silver platter? I used to believe that hard work and loyalty would eventually be rewarded. Now, at 23, I'm left with nothing but 3 years of lost time, calloused hands, and the bitter taste of betrayal that won't leave my mouth. The worst part? I can still hear my sister's band practicing in the garage of her new house. The house my parents bought her with the money that should have secured my future. Let me introduce myself and the cast of characters in this tragedy I call my life. I'm James, 23M, the eldest child and former engineering student at Boston University. My sister, Rebecca, 19F, is the golden child, creative, charismatic, and completely obsessed with her indie rock band. Our parents, Michael, 47M, and Diana, 45F, own the Golden Fork, a struggling Italian restaurant that had been slowly dying for years. Then there's Uncle Pete, 43M, Dad's younger brother, and our family's voice of reason, or at least he tried to be. 3 years ago, I was thriving in my second year of college. Engineering was my passion, and I had dreams of designing renewable energy systems. My GPA was solid, and I'd just landed a prestigious summer internship that could have set me up for life. But then came that phone call from Mom, the one that would derail everything. The Golden Fork was drowning in debt. The restaurant had been in our family for 2 generations, and my parents were facing bankruptcy. Dad had suffered a minor heart attack from the stress, and Mom was working herself to exhaustion trying to keep everything afloat. They needed help, and as the eldest child, they turned to me. The choice seemed simple then. Family comes first, right? I still remember packing up my dorm room, my roommate Brad looking at me like I was crazy. "You're throwing away your future," he said. Maybe he was right. But what kind of son would I be if I let my family lose everything? The internship offer burned a hole in my inbox as I sent my withdrawal email. What followed was a crash course in restaurant management. 18-hour days became my new normal. While my former classmates were studying thermodynamics, I was learning about food costs, inventory management, and how to handle difficult customers. Rebecca continued her high school senior year uninterrupted, spending her evenings practicing with her band in our garage, the sound of their amateur rock carrying through the walls as I counted the day's receipts late into the night. The restaurant consumed my life, but slowly, things began to change. I modernized our ordering system, revamped the menu while keeping the family favorites, and started a social media presence that brought in a younger crowd. Uncle Pete helped when he could, teaching me the tricks of the trade he'd learned from his own restaurant ventures in Chicago. The Golden Fork wasn't just surviving anymore, it was beginning to thrive. Little did I know that my success would become the foundation of my own undoing. As I watched the restaurant's numbers climb, I began to dream again. Maybe, just maybe, I could save enough to return to college. Perhaps all the sacrifice would lead to something greater. I had no idea then that fate and my own family had other plans. I should have seen the signs. The whispered conversations between my parents that stopped when I entered the room. The sudden interest they took in Rebecca's bands. Growing potential. The way Mom started talking about how the restaurant industry was changing. How maybe it was time for a fresh start. But I was too busy keeping our family legacy alive to notice the storm brewing on the horizon. Looking back now, I realize that success can be just as dangerous as failure. Sometimes, it gives people exactly what they need to show you who they really are. And in my case, it would reveal a truth about my family that would shatter everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and the true cost of sacrifice. The restaurant's transformation didn't happen overnight. It was built on countless small victories and silent sacrifices that carved themselves into my soul. Every morning, I'd trace my fingers over the burns on my hands, battle scars from learning to work the line where our chef quit without notice. Each scar told a story of survival, of the dreams I'd buried beneath mountains of receipts and vendor invoices. The turning point came during a sweltering summer evening when everything threatened to collapse. Our air conditioning had failed during dinner service, and the kitchen felt like the inside of a volcano. The dining room was packed, and Rebecca's band was performing their first ever live show in our newly renovated outdoor patio, my idea to attract a younger crowd. I watched through the kitchen window as she basked in the applause, while I juggled orders and tried to keep our overworked kitchen staff from walking out. That night, something shifted in my parents' eyes when they looked at Rebecca. Maybe it was the way the crowd responded to her music, or how naturally she commanded attention. I saw that familiar spark of possibility ignite in their expressions, the same one they'd had years ago when they first bought the Golden Fork. But this time, it wasn't about the restaurant. It was about her. I didn't understand the weight of that moment then. How could I? I was too busy celebrating our record-breaking sales and the glowing reviews pouring in on social media. The Golden Fork had become the talk of the town, and our table reservations were booked weeks in advance. We even started getting calls from local food critics and lifestyle magazines. Uncle Pete noticed the change before I did. He started showing up more frequently, watching my parents with a worried expression I couldn't quite decode. "James," he'd say, catching me during inventory counts, "you need to protect yourself. Success changes people, especially family." I dismissed his concerns, too exhausted from 60-hour weeks to see the shadows lengthening around me. Rebecca's band, Midnight Carousel, began playing regular gigs at the restaurant. I supported it. After all, live music brought in more customers, and seeing my sister happy made the endless hours feel more worthwhile. But then, I started noticing the subtle shifts. Mom taking longer breaks to help Rebecca with her music career planning. Dad discussing the restaurant's finances in hushed tones when he thought I wasn't listening. The real gut punch came when I overheard Mom on the phone with her sister, my Aunt Sarah. "The restaurant's finally worth something," she whispered, thinking I was busy in the kitchen. "Rebecca's band could be huge, but they need proper equipment, studio time. This could be her big break. James is good at running things, but Rebecca, she has that special something. She could really make it." Those words echoed in my head for days. James is good at running things. Like I was some kind of reliable machine, a dependable workhorse who'd sacrificed his dreams to save their legacy. Meanwhile, Rebecca's artistic pursuits were seen as something extraordinary, something worth nurturing at all costs. I threw myself even harder into the work, hoping to prove I was more than just a reliable manager. I developed new seasonal menus, organized successful community events, and even started a small catering operation that doubled our revenue. The Golden Fork wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was becoming an institution. One quiet Sunday morning, as I sat alone in the office reviewing our quarterly numbers, I found an envelope from a real estate agent tucked under some paperwork. Inside was a preliminary valuation of the restaurant. The number made my hand shake. $850,000. 3 years of my blood, sweat, and tears had transformed our failing family business into something worth nearly $1 million. I should have confronted them right then. Should have demanded to know why they were getting the restaurant value without telling me. But some part of me, the part that still believed in family loyalty, convinced me there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe they were looking into expansion opportunities, or considering taking out a loan for renovations. How wrong I was. How devastatingly, catastrophically wrong. Because what came next would teach me the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the people who say they're looking out for your future are actually building their own, right over the ashes of your sacrificed dreams. The truth didn't crack like thunder. It seeped in like poison, slow and irreversible. It was a Tuesday evening when I discovered the first concrete evidence of my family's betrayal, buried in a stack of paperwork Mom had asked me to organize. A contract with a music producer, dated 3 months earlier, with a required investment of $200,000. Attached was a loan application that used the Golden Fork as collateral. My stomach turned to ice as I read the details. They'd been planning this for months, maybe even years. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Every late-night conversation, every secretive phone call, every time they dismissed my suggestions about reinvesting in the restaurant, it all crystallized into a horrifying mosaic of premeditated betrayal. The business I'd sacrificed everything to save wasn't being preserved. It was being fattened for slaughter. That night, as I sat alone in the darkened restaurant, surrounded by the legacy I've rebuilt with my own hands, Uncle Pete's words from months ago echoed in my mind. Success changes people, especially family. He'd seen it coming, hadn't he? The way my parents' eyes had started reflecting dollar signs instead of pride when they looked at the restaurant's books. how they'd begun treating my contributions not as investments in our family's future, but as stepping stones to Rebecca's dreams. I confronted them the next morning in the restaurant's office, my hands trembling as I laid out the evidence of their schemes. The look on their faces wasn't guilt or shame, it was annoyance, as if I'd ruined their perfectly orchestrated plan by discovering it too soon. Mom's response felt like a knife between my ribs. "James, honey, you have to understand. Rebecca has a real chance at something special. The restaurant was always meant to be a stepping stone, not a final destination." My father, the man who'd once told me that family legacy was everything, couldn't even meet my eyes as he explained their vision. Rebecca's band had caught the attention of a prominent producer. They needed studio time, professional equipment, marketing, things that required substantial investment. The restaurant, now profitable thanks to my sacrifices, was their ticket to funding Rebecca's dreams. "But what about my dreams?" I demanded, my voice cracking with the weight of 3 years of buried hopes. "What about the engineering career I gave up? The internship that could have changed my life?" Mom's response was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "You've proven you're capable of succeeding at anything, James. Rebecca needs this chance. She's an artist. She sees the world differently. You're the practical one, the reliable one. You'll land on your feet." The words struck me like physical blows. Practical. Reliable. Code words for disposable. For someone whose dreams could be sacrificed on the altar of another's ambitions. I looked at the office walls, at the framed reviews I'd earned, the awards the restaurant had won under my management. Each one now felt like a marker of my own naivety. That evening, as I heard Rebecca's band practicing in the restaurant's courtyard, each note felt like a mockery of my sacrifices. The same songs that had once filled me with brotherly pride now carried the bitter taste of betrayal. Through the window, I watched my parents swaying to the music, their faces glowing with the kind of pride they'd never shown for my achievements. Uncle Pete found me later, sitting in the empty dining room after closing. He didn't offer empty comfort or useless advice. Instead, he placed a small notebook in front of me, his own records of the restaurant's transformation under my management. "You did this," he said quietly. "Never let them convince you otherwise." But the final blow, the one that shattered any remaining illusions about family loyalty, was yet to come. As I would soon discover, my parents' betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined, and the true price of being the reliable one was steeper than I ever thought possible. The sale happened with brutal efficiency. One morning, I arrived at the restaurant to find a "sold" sign in the window, the ink still fresh on the contract my parents had signed without my knowledge. The buyers were a local restaurant group, eager to capitalize on the reputation I'd built. $850,000. That's what they valued my sacrificed dreams at. That's what my parents deemed a fair price for 3 years of my life. But the true devastation came during a family meeting that evening, orchestrated by my parents, with the calculated precision of executioners. The dining room, where I'd spent countless hours creating memories for other families, became the stage for the destruction of my own. Rebecca sat there, practically vibrating with barely contained excitement, while Mom and Dad unveiled their grand plan with the theatricality of game show hosts revealing a prize. The money would be divided, they explained, but not equally. Not even close. $400,000 would go directly to Rebecca's band, for studio time, equipment, marketing, and a professional manager they'd already lined up. Another $200,000 would buy her a house, with a converted garage for band practice. The remaining money would cover the restaurant's outstanding debts and provide a small cushion for my parents' retirement. And me? I was offered $10,000, seed money, for my fresh start, Mom called it. "Think of it as an opportunity to find your own path," Dad added, as if he hadn't been the one who dragged me off my original path 3 years ago. The amount wouldn't even cover 1 semester of the engineering program I'd abandoned. The worst part wasn't the money. It was watching Rebecca's face as she detailed her plans for the recording studio, describing exactly how she'd spend every dollar of my sacrifice. She wasn't malicious about it. She was just oblivious, wrapped in the warm cocoon of our parents' unconditional support. Why wouldn't she be? She'd never had to question their love or prove her worth. While I'd been burning my hands on hot grills and calculating profit margins until dawn, she'd been finding her artistic voice. Uncle P erupted in anger, calling it what it was, theft, betrayal, a perversion of family loyalty. But my parents had their justifications ready, honed like weapons. Rebecca's talent is once in a lifetime, Mom insisted. This is her moment, her chance to make it big. James understands sacrifice. He's proven that. He can rebuild. Rebecca needs this now, while she's young and the industry is paying attention. I sat there, numb, as they dissected my future like vultures over carrion. Every argument I made was deflected with practiced ease. But I gave up my education. You can always go back to school later. I rebuilt this place from nothing. And we're so proud of how capable you become. This was supposed to be my inheritance, too. The restaurant was never meant to be your final destination. The coup de grace came when Rebecca, in what she probably thought was a gesture of generosity, offered me a position as her band's manager. You're so good with business stuff, she said, her voice dripping with condescension disguised as kindness. And this way, you'd still be part of the journey. That's when something inside me shattered, not like glass breaking, but like ice melting, cold and irreversible. I looked at my family, really looked at them, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. These people weren't my support system. They were opportunists who'd used my loyalty as a tool to build someone else's dreams. I left the restaurant that night, the place I'd poured my soul into for 3 years, knowing I would never return. But what I didn't know then was that fate had one more cruel twist in store. A revelation that would force me to question not just my family's recent betrayal, but the very foundation of our entire relationship. That night, as I sat in Uncle Pete's kitchen, nursing a bourbon in my shattered dreams, he finally revealed the truth he'd been carrying like a cancer for 23 years. The words fell from his lips like stones into still water, creating ripples that would forever alter the landscape of my identity. The restaurant wasn't just a family business, James. It was your inheritance. Your biological father's inheritance to you. The room tilted on its axis. Uncle Pete's hand shook as he pulled out a yellowed envelope from his desk drawer, containing documents that would reshape my entire existence. My father, the man who'd just sold my future out from under me, wasn't my biological father at all. The restaurant had belonged to Thomas Carlton, my real father, a man who died before I was born. He'd been Mom's first husband, and his last act had been to write into his will that the golden fork would pass to his unborn child, to me, when I turned 25. The truth crashed through my mind like a wrecking ball. Mom had remarried when I was barely a year old, to the man I'd called Dad my entire life. They'd taken control of the restaurant as my guardians, a temporary arrangement that was supposed to end in 2 years when I turned 25. My entire identity splintered and reformed in the space of those few sentences. Uncle Pete's voice cracked as he explained how he'd watched silently for years, sworn to secrecy by my mother's threats of cutting him out of our lives completely if he ever told me. He'd been Thomas's best friend, had promised to watch over his unborn child. The guilt of his decades-long silence painted deep lines around his eyes. Suddenly, every memory shifted, took on new meaning. The way they'd pushed me to drop out of college right before the restaurant started failing. Was it because they knew their time was running out? Had they orchestrated the entire crisis to ensure I'd be too emotionally invested, too financially dependent to challenge their authority when the truth finally came out? The photos on Uncle Pete's phone provided undeniable proof. Images of my biological father standing proudly in front of the golden fork 24 years ago, his hand resting protectively over my mother's pregnant belly. The resemblance between us was striking, down to the way we smiled. A final photo showed the original will, its contents spelling out my rightful inheritance in stark legal terms. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the evidence of my stolen identity. Each image was another nail in the coffin of everything I believed about my family. The restaurant hadn't just been a business. It had been my birthright, my biological father's final gift to me. And they'd sold it, knowing full well they had no legal right to do so. The bourbon in my glass couldn't wash away the bitter taste of this new reality. All those years of guilt trips about family loyalty, about sacrificing for the greater good, they'd been manipulating me with a warped version of family obligation while simultaneously robbing me of my true family legacy. Uncle Pete's next words sent ice through my veins. There's more, James. Something about Rebecca, something that makes this betrayal even more twisted than you could imagine. The look in his eyes told me that the final piece of this familial nightmare would shatter whatever remaining illusions I had about the people I'd called family for 23 years. The final truth emerged like a poisoned dagger, twisting in my already bleeding heart. Uncle Pete's hand shook as he pulled out one last document, a private investigator's report he commissioned years ago, when his suspicions about my parents' financial manipulations first began. Rebecca isn't just your half-sister, James. She's not related to you at all. The revelation detonated in my chest like a psychological bomb. Rebecca was actually the daughter of my mother's closest friend, who died in a car accident when Rebecca was just 2. My parents, no, my mother, and the man I'd thought was my father, had adopted her secretly, using money from the restaurant's accounts. Money that legally belonged to me, even then. Every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd surrendered, hadn't just been to save a family business. It had been systematically orchestrated to build a future for a child who'd been given everything I'd been denied. They'd used my own inheritance, my birthright, to create a golden path for their chosen child, while forcing me to be the architect of my own displacement. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. The timing of the restaurant's crisis, coinciding with Rebecca's growing music ambitions. The careful manipulation of my guilt and sense of family duty. The urgent push to sell before I turned 25, when I would have legally inherited everything. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd orchestrated a decades-long con to steal my biological father's legacy and redirect it to their chosen child. I sat in Uncle Pete's kitchen until dawn, watching the sun rise over a world that no longer made sense. My phone buzzed repeatedly, messages from Mom about family unity and understanding the bigger picture, from Dad about being practical and supporting your sister's dreams. Sister. The word felt like ash in my mouth. The final message came from Rebecca herself. A photo of her band in their new studio space. My studio space, bought with my stolen inheritance, with a caption that broke something fundamental inside me. Dreams really do come true when you have a supportive family. That evening, I wrote 3 letters. The first was to my biological father, Thomas Carlton, telling him about the son he never knew and promising to honor his memory in my own way. The second was to my parents, accompanied by copies of all the legal documentation Uncle Pete had preserved, informing them that they would be hearing from my lawyer. The third was to Rebecca, not to hurt her, but to tell her the truth she deserved to know about her own history and the cost of her dreams. Uncle Pete helped me find a lawyer who specialized in estate fraud. The case would be complex, they warned me, but the documentation was solid. The truth about the Golden Fork's ownership, about Rebecca's adoption, about the systematic theft of my inheritance, it would all come out in court. I didn't want revenge. What I wanted was justice, not just for myself, but for Thomas Carlton, the father whose final act of love had been to secure his unborn child's future. A future that had been stolen, twisted, and resold to create someone else's dreams. Today, 6 months later, I'm back in engineering school, funded by a loan from Uncle Pete. The lawsuit is ongoing, but I'm not bitter anymore. I'm just tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the manipulation, tired of being the reliable one who sacrifices everything for a family that never really existed. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about the Golden Fork, not as it was in those final years, but as it should have been, a legacy passed from father to son, a dream realized through honest work and true family love. Those dreams don't hurt anymore. They remind me that while blood may be thicker than water, the truth is thickest of all. Rebecca's band released their first single last week. I haven't listened to it. Some songs, like Some Family Ties, are better left unheard. Instead, I focus on building my own future, one that can't be sold out from under me. Because the greatest lesson in all of this wasn't about family loyalty or betrayal. It was about the courage to walk away and rebuild from the ashes of stolen dreams. Uncle Pete says I'm more like my real father than I could ever know. Thomas would be proud. He tells me, not of what they stole from you, but of how you've risen above it. Maybe that's true. Maybe somewhere, Thomas Carlton is watching his son finally reclaim his own path, his own dreams, his own definition of family. And maybe that's the real inheritance he left me. Not a restaurant or a legacy, but the strength to stand up and say, enough. Some prices are too high, even for family. Especially for family.